Good evening, study partners. Tonight's lesson is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Rivka Bas Harab Reb Shlomo. We are holding Shekalim chapter 5. We're going to jump right into the Mishnah, Mishnah Aleph. Elohein ha-memunim shayu b'mikdash. There were different people in charge, appointees, administrators, if you will, that were in the Beis HaMikdash. And we're going to list all of these people here. Now, the second Beis HaMikdash, and this is what the Mishnah is talking about, lasted for 420 years. So it's obvious that these appointees that we're going to list right here are not the appointees for all 420 years. So
are they the last ones? Like the last generation?
So let me say. So the Gemara in Yerushalmi explains what's going on over here and gives two opinions. One opinion is that the ones that are listed here were the ones who were the most righteous amongst all of them. And so therefore we memorialize their name here in the Mishnah. It's a big source. Another opinion is that these were the first of the second Beis HaMikdash. And an interesting idea, just like you have Lahavdil by the pharaohs. There was one pharaoh, and then the next pharaohs took on his name, right? The next pharaoh, so all of them were called pharaohs. So according to this other opinion, successive administrators, when they took over the office, they took over their name.
So they would be called Shekalim ben Pinchas, for example?
Yeah, well, we'll get, yes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about who were the administrators and what were the administrators of, what were they in charge of. Yochanan ben Pinchas ala chisamis. Yochanan ben Pinchas was on the tokens. What are the tokens? So have you ever been to a carnival where instead of paying money for the cotton candy or for the booths, you go to a central place where you buy tokens? And you use those tokens to buy things or to play different games.
Those tokens were for the.
So Lahavdil, in the Beis HaMikdash, you didn't show up with your money and then buy different libations and flour offerings, etc. First, you went to a table where they were selling these tokens, and these tokens were different tokens. We're going to learn a little bit later. And so, with that token, you can go purchase the accessories for your offering.
Were these salespeople?
We're gonna get
they
into
were
it.
part of the actual Beis HaMikdash?
Yeah, these were people who were in charge. These were people.
No. I'm saying the actual vendors that you would go buy the flour. Or
they were part of the Beis HaMikdash.
They were part of the Beis HaMikdash.
Yes.
Okay.
We already learned in last week
that you were able to buy
that you were able to buy the different flowers, offerings, etc. Okay. Achia, a fellow named Achia, he was in charge of the libations, and over here libations, Nesachim literally means the libations, that which is poured. But it's a loose term here, and it means all of the accompaniments, even if it includes flour or oil. Matisya, then Shmuel ala Pioses. Matisya, the son of Shmuel, over the Pioses, the lotteries. We learn, I believe, in Masechtas Yuma, we learn about this. We learn about this in other places in the Mishnah, where we talk about the different lotteries that people Kohanim would win these lotteries, and by winning, they had the opportunity to serve in a specific service. Again, this is mostly discussed in Masechtas Yuma. Psachia ala kinim. Psachia was over the birds' nests, literally the birds of the bird offerings. Now, the Mishnah says, Psachia is a Mordechai. This fellow that we're calling Psachia
is actually named
Mordechai. Which Mordechai?
Mordechai from Mordechai and Esther?
Mordechai from Mordechai and Esther. Lo menikra shmei Psachia. So why is he referred to it? Why do we call him Psachia? Shayepeseach b'dvorim v'dersham. Hashem gave him an incredible ability. Hashem opened his mouth, and he opens his mouth, and he's able to open mysterious matters. V'yedei shivim lashon, and he also knew 70 languages. So this was a gift from Hashem. Psachia is posach ka, Hashem opened him his mouth. This is a gift that Hashem gave to him. These abilities, these extraordinary abilities. And so therefore he was called Psachia. Now, knowing the 70 languages was good for being on the Sanhedrin, which we know he was on. It was also good for his role as a government, as a advisor to the king. It was also good for all the different people who would come and look to buy bird offerings.
So at this point, while serving, I would assume...
One was in Persia, one was he moved back to Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah,
after
so
the
so while he moved back to Eretz Yisrael, was he also serving the Persian government?
Not exactly, because he was in Eretz Yisrael. V'yadei Shivim Lashon, and he knew 70. So the 70 languages. So he was able to communicate with all the different types of people who came to get these bird offerings. Ben Achia al Chayli Me'ayim. Ben Achia was in charge of. He was like a gastroenterologist, and that was very much needed in the Beis Hamikdash because you have
all the meats.
Because you have Kohanim eating lots and lots of meat, and they were trying to avoid the prohibition of noiser, leaving things left over. So they had to eat a lot of meat, and in busy times they didn't have enough time to cook this meat thoroughly. So eating a lot of this meat that's not thoroughly cooked would give them digestional issues. And so this fellow named Achia, he was in charge of the medicines and the different herbs, and he would treat the Kohanim that were sick.
How many Kohanim did we have in one Beis Hamikdash?
A lot, especially in busy times. Nechunya Chefer Shichim. Nechunya was the digger of pits, and he made sure that there was enough water. In the olden days, they would store water in cisterns. So he would make sure that there was enough water in these pits. Gvini Karois. Gvini was the crier, and we talk about that in other places in the Mishnah. He had a very, very loud voice. You can hear him from miles away. Ben Gever al Neilas Sha'arim, a fellow named Ben Gever for the closing and the opening of the gates. Ben Bavai al Apkiya. Ben Bavai was in charge of the whip. The Levium and the Kohanim would stand watch over the Beis Hamikdash at night, and somebody who fell asleep would get whipped. And sometimes they would light his cloak on fire. This was done as a fear tactic that they shouldn't fall asleep. Ben Arza al Hatziltzal. Ben Arza al Hatziltzal. Ben Arza was in charge of the cymbals that were used for the music in the Beis Hamikdash. Hugras ben Levi al Asher. Hugras ben Levi was in charge of the music. Beis Garmu al Amaisi Lechem Aponim. The household of Garmu was in charge of the showbread. The showbread had to be made in such a way that it had many faces, and it wasn't meant to crack and not get stale. It had to stay there from 1 week to the next. It had to stay on the shulchan, and so the exact process of how to make this correctly was like a family secret in the Garmu family, and they would pass it down. And so they were in charge of that.
Wasn't there a family that also...
Tinas, let's just finish the Mishnah. The Avtinas family was in charge of the Keteris. The Keteris had a special recipe, exactly how to do it correctly, and they were in charge of that. Elazar ala Pareches. Elazar was in charge of the curtains, and there were many different curtains, 13 of them. The one on the Holy of Holies was discussed in Masechtas Yuma also. It was very expensive. And Uf Pinchas ala Malbush, which is also talked about in Masechtas Yuma, where they talk about how expensive the clothes of the Kohen Gadol were, which they were a fortune of money. In any case, these are the people who were appointed, and they are memorialized in the Mishnah. What a great schus. You had a question?
2 questions. Number 1, Elazar and Pinchas must have been the most amazing people ever because they don't have Ben anything. So they're probably very special and popular. That's number 1. Number 2 is, wasn't there a family that had the wood
First of all, you have Achia, was also not a Ben Achia. And then you had
the question that goes on all the people that are mentioned. It's not
so
just these
some of them
two.
were known by their father's name, and some were known by their own name.
And the second question wasn't there a family that was also in charge of the wood that was for the...
We're going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
There cannot be less than 3 treasurers and 7 supervisors over those treasurers. As a general rule, whenever we have leaders, community leaders that have financial matters, that they're in charge of financial matters, there always needs to be at least 2 of them. There was an exception to this general rule, and that was Achia, who was in charge of the medicines in the Beis HaMikdash, which had a budget, and so therefore it's considered a monetary position, as well as Elazar, who was in charge of the Pareches. And as I mentioned before, the Pareches were very, very expensive, especially the one for the Kodesh Kodashim, and that was replaced every year. And the reason for this is because the vast majority, well, at least the majority of the people accepted their piety and accepted them as a leader, so it was unnecessary to put somebody else together with them on these matters. There were 4. Now we mentioned earlier there were tokens that were sold, and those tokens were used to buy were exchanged for different items. So what were these things? So what were these tokens for? There were 4 tokens, and it was written on them, Egel, Zachar, Gdi, and Chayta. So that's Hebrew for calf, ram, kid, and Chayta is a sinner. Now let's just go over what this means for a moment. Egel was the token that said Egel was used to purchase the libations for cattle offering, and this wasn't just the libations, but it was 3 asenim of fine flour, and a half a hin of oil, and a half a hin of wine. These are measurements. That was, so when you presented that token, that's what you would get. Zachar, which literally means male, was used for a ram offering. That was in exchange for this token, you would get 2 esrenim of fine flour, 1/3 of a hin of oil, and 1/3 of a hin of wine. For Gedi, the Gedi token, you would get, that was for a goat or a sheep offering. You had an esarin of fine flour, 1/4 hin of oil, and 1/4 hin of wine. And this was used for all sheep, goats, and sometimes even cows, as explained in Masechtas Chulin. And the chayta was used for the Metzora, and this included, he had 3 offerings that were all lambs, and they were all accompanied by nesachim. So the total requirement was 3 esrainim of flour, fine flour, 10 lugim of olive oil, and that was 3 for each of the for each mix, and a 10th was smeared on the Metzera's right earlobe and the right thumb, as we'll learn about in Masechtas Metzera. And so when we learn about the tzaras, so in any case, all of these, the point is that each of these tokens would get you different accompaniments for different offerings. Ben Azi says there was actually a 5th token, and what's going to happen here is he's going to dispute what we said before, that there are 4. And the reason he says there's a 5th is because in Metzora there's different korbanos that a Metzora can bring. If he's wealthy, he brings all lambs, and if he's poor, so he only brings 1 of them and 2 birds instead. And the birds don't require libations ever, so therefore
different combination.
It's a different combination. The Chachamim disagree with this, and they say that 4 was enough because one of the other tokens was sufficient for the mitzvah that was poor as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, did they also talk about the times of Mashiach to come?
We're going to actually mention that at some point. We're going to talk a little bit about that soon, but it's not talked about in the Beis Hamikdash specifically. But there are different things that Yecheskel Hanavi saw when he had his vision of the third Beis Hamikdash, and they would do things that were similar to those visions for the second Beis Hamikdash. So the answer is yes, and we'll talk about that, but it's not overtly discussed here. We'll let the Mishnah take its course here. And in addition, Benazi says, "Va'arom is kosev aleim." Egel zachar gdichete dal v'chete asher egel. He says that actually the words weren't written in Hebrew, but they were written in Aramis and Aramaic. And the reason for that is because that was the most common language spoken at the time. And so there were lots of different people coming to the Beis Hamikdash. And so in order to facilitate better understanding of the tokens weren't a religious item. The tokens were just tokens. So he claims that it was written, he submits that it was written in Aramaic. Egel, now the token that was used, that was named Egel, was used Mishamish Imnichse Voka Gedelim Uktanim, was used for the libations of large and small cattle. Schorim or Kavis, whether male or female. The Gdi token Mishamish Niske Tzoyin Gedelim Uktanim was used for sheep, big and small, Schorim or Kavis, male and female. Chutz Mishal Elim, except for ewes, for rams. Zocher Mishamish Niske Elim, the token that was called Zocher was used for rams, Bilvad alone. Chayte Mishamish Niske Shalish Behem Shal Mitzrayim. The one that said Chayte was used specifically for a wealthy Mitzrayah who was coming to be purified. And as we said before, he would bring 3 animals. And so he had this special token for that scenario. And he would buy that token for that scenario. Mishnah Dalet, Mishayu Mavakesh Nesachim Heilich Le Eitzel Yechanan Shumim Monalach Isamis. We mentioned earlier that Yechanan was the appointee, he was in charge of the tokens. So a person who wanted to purchase the libations would go to him. He would give him the appropriate amount of money, and he would get a token from him. Then he would take that token and would go to Boy Loy Eitzel Achia. He would go to the fellow named Achia. He was in charge of distributing the actual libations on the flour. He would give him the token, and he would get from him the appropriate nesachim, libations, and flour. Now, at the end of the evening, Yochanan and Achia would meet up together. Achia would produce the amount of tokens that he received, and they would calculate how much the money, tally up the money that was in the coffer. If there was more money of value relative to the tokens, so the temple treasury would keep the money. Even though it was extra, they would keep the money. But if it was less, Yochanan had to pay from his house. He was the one in charge of the sales. And so if there was missing, he had to pay for it. Because a rule we've already mentioned a few times. Hegdish always has the upper hand, and they never come out the losers. And so therefore, if there's missing money, he has to pay.
Besides one way. I don't remember the way, but you told me this.
Yeah, so we've spoken when they would sell, according to certain opinions, they would sell things, and perhaps this would cause a loss. But as a general rule, the treasury has the upper hand. Mishnah Hey. Somebody who lost his token, what does he do? So he has to wait till the evening. If when they tally up, it turns out that it seems that, yes, indeed, there is extra money and corresponding to his specific token.
So no refunds until the end.
So then they would give it to him because there's a mitzvah of Shavas Aveda. But if not, if the tally didn't correspond to his loss, they wouldn't give it to him. And the name of the day was written on each one of these token receipts. Was written every day. They would write the date. And there are two opinions as to why that would be. One was if somebody lost it and somebody else found it. If somebody lost it and he didn't bother waiting to the end of the day and somebody else found it, so they would have to find it that day in order to use it. Because if you lose it, Hegdish is the one who gets to keep it. The loss goes to Hegdish, not to you.
Hang on a second.
But there's another explanation, and that is they wanted to prevent people from buying tokens when the tokens were low cost, and then keeping them for a later date when the tokens cost more.
So technically, if you want to run a business, you can
thereby cheating the fixed prices of the daily fixed prices or the monthly fixed prices, I should say, for the for the temple treasury. So therefore, it was a daily change. Wow. Here's a beautiful Mishnah. All Mishnahs are beautiful, but this one is particularly inspirational. There were two collection chambers in the Beis HaMikdash. Achas lishchas chashoim. One was the chamber of the whisperers, or the discreet. Achas lishkas hakelim, and one was the chamber of the vessels. Lishkas
all the
chashoim
vessels are made out of gold, right?
No. Lishkas chashoim, the chamber for the discreet. God-fearing people and sin-fearing people would go in there, and they would put money in there quietly. No one knew what they were doing. Vanim b'nei tovim, and poor people, sons of good people, they would go in there and they would take money out. So basically, nobody knew who was depositing and who was taking out. You go in, either you put money and you take money, or you take money out. And I have a very fond memory. Growing up in Crown Heights, there was a fellow named Shimshon Stock who ran the Temche Shabbos of Crown Heights.
I used to do the
and he had a big bucket, if you will, and I remember him announcing, and he would collect money. People would go around, and people would dump money in, and he would say, if you need money, just take money out. And I remember actually seeing somebody taking money out once. Most of the time, people would come to him, and he would give support. It's a worthy organization till today. But that's what the idea is. That's
the same organization they said delivered the food boxes to people.
Yes, absolutely. Chaver Simcha Shabbos V'Yom Tov, it's called.
Yeah, I used to do work for them.
Lishkas Hakelim, what was the chamber of the vessels? Kol mishu misnadev kli zarka l'seicha. Anybody who wanted to donate a vessel would toss it in there. Achas l'shleishim yom. Once in 30 days, gizborim poyischim isa. The treasurers would open it. Any vessel that was appropriate for the temple upkeep, they would leave there. They would leave it, and they would use it for those purposes. The rest were sold and for money, and would go for the funds for the temple upkeep. I think we're going to stop here. I don't think we're going to have enough time to learn the next Perek. And next week, I will not be around. I'll be away, Mirz Hashem. So there's a good chance I will record it and put it up on our Facebook as well as on our website for people to see, so we don't miss a week. So look out next week. I don't know that it'll be exactly 8:30 p.m., but at some point on our Facebook page for the upcoming chapter Vav. Have a very good evening, and I look forward to studying with you again.